For the last couple of weeks, all I've been hearing is, man, Miyazaki was cooking with this DLC. And since I've been playing the DLC since launch, I'm starting to ask myself, was he actually cooking? In this video, I'm going to give you my unfiltered, honest critique of Elden Ring's DLC Shadow of the Erdtree. Let's get into it. Let's start off with the first problem I have with the DLC, is how you actually enter it. As you know, you have to beat Radahn, and you have to beat Mohg. But this doesn't really make sense to me because Radahn is an early game boss, while Mohg is a late game boss. So when you actually get to Mohg and defeat him and enter the DLC, the items you're going to be finding in the DLC, for the most part, are low smithing stones and low somber smithing stones, which makes no sense because there is no way an early game character would ever be able to beat Mohg to begin with, unless you're some sort of god that can just beat Radahn early and then beat Mohg early by doing Vare's quest in the very beginning of the game, but chances are most people aren't going to do that. So by them doing this kind of makes it to where the DLC is kind of in like no man's land. You're in the DLC exploring as a late game character, finding nothing but early game upgrade materials, which is weird because it seems like they wanted you to get here earlier, but defeating Mohgwyn, like I said, is extremely hard as a low level character. He practically one-shots you, and getting through his second phase is almost like borderline impossible without his cracked tier. I feel like the DLC just has like an identity crisis in terms of like what level you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to get into it. I think a better idea overall would have just been to make the lore something completely different and just allowed you to enter the DLC after beating Radahn or something. Because then it would have made sense, because then you would be getting all of these early upgrade materials, you'd be getting to try new weapons all at the same time, and it would have felt more natural. But because they went with their lore decision, it kind of screws up the DLC in my opinion. Now, I know this next part might get me in trouble because FromSoft fans are rabid. They hate any type of negativity. They hate not hearing that Miyazaki is a genius. Personally, I don't care. I don't have a loyalty to a company. I just tell you if a game's good or not. So with that said, let's talk about the map. The map is actually beautifully designed. Great areas, great scenery, great everything. Everything connects nicely, and the map design is 10 out of 10. My problem with it is that it's empty. There is literally nothing in this map for the most part. The finger areas are giant, yet they're empty. The jagged peak is huge, but it's empty. There's actually no enemies in the jagged peak at all besides 3 dragons. The Abyssal Woods is practically bigger than everything in the entire DLC, and all that's in there is just rats. And a few Hornsent and those eye things from Bloodborne that cast Frenzy on you. Just look at this map. The Abyssal Woods is so huge, and you can't use Torrent in any of it. And you're just walking the entire time, just looking for nothing. It's empty. There's practically nothing there. At least in the base game, they reused Leonine Misbegotten like 40 times. You fight Leonine's dad, you fight Leonine himself, you fight his brother, his sister, his cousin. You even fight Leonine's dog.
Jesus H. Christ!
You fight him in Redmane Castle, you fight him in the Haligtree. Hell, you could even have sex with Leonine Misbegotten if you want to in this game. This guy is literally everywhere. Every boss in the base game is Leonine Misbegotten. The least they could have done is just sprinkled in some more Leonine Misbegottens into the DLC, because he only shows up once, which was actually hilarious. Getting back to the map though, it's so huge, yet there's only really one legacy dungeon in there, which is the Shadow Keep, which is great, don't get me wrong. In my opinion, it resembles the Grand Archives too much from Dark Souls 3, but hey, at least it's an actual legacy dungeon. Castle Ensis is too small, it's practically a Castle Morn. The Stone Fissure isn't even a legacy dungeon. Getting to Ramana, Saint of the Bud, isn't even a legacy dungeon. The Shadow Tree Avatar doesn't have a legacy dungeon. Commander Gaius is just stationed in God Nowhere, just protecting 5 Shadow Tree fragments, which is just a complete waste. And Midra's mansion is tiny as hell, considering the Abyssal Woods is bigger than the state of Texas. The only remaining area that's kind of a legacy dungeon, although it's kind of not, is Belarus Settlement, and it only truly becomes a legacy dungeon when it's connected to Anir Lim at the very end of the game. Because the map, for the most part, is just littered with those shadow enemies and the occasional dude with dual blades and fly enemy. There's really nothing anywhere. It's like they created 5 different enemies and just threw them all on top of this giant map. Everything you fight in it is basically from the base game, with the exception of like a few new enemies. So what they should have done was just scaled the map smaller and worked more on enemy design or character design than anything else. Because I feel the enemies in the DLC do the actual map a disservice, because the map is actually great. The Jagged Peak is one of my favorite areas of the game, but what would have been nice is if there was actually something there besides just 3 dragons and then Bale himself. To be honest, I don't know how they could have 2 finger graveyards just completely empty, devoid of anything. There's like no items in these areas either. There's 2 remembrances in each one of them, and they're just these weird little alien fingers that really don't have any meaning to do there besides just play American Gladiators and try not to get hit by their purple stun attack. These places are massive, and they take big chunks of the map, and you never even have to visit them more than once. Now, I know most people are going to be like, oh, you're just a hater, blah, 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 blah.
I am not amused.
But I don't give a shit. I love this game, and I was expecting a lot more when I saw the size of this map. Adding this pseudo-fake difficulty by getting Scadu Tree fragments was just kind of lame, because you don't actually know when you're actually supposed to fight certain bosses. And it makes the bosses seem harder than they actually are, and then you can trivialize the bosses by just getting a bunch of Shadow Tree fragments early, because you can get up to like level 10 right away without even fighting a boss. But then I know what some people were saying. They were saying, oh, but I don't want to enter the DLC with my level 500 character. Then I'm just going to steamroll everything. And it's like, just make a new character and play the base game and then get into the DLC. They give you 10 slots to make a character for a reason. Who cares? Like, you can't be attached to one fucking character. And if you only want to play with your one character, then you don't actually even like the game to begin with. Moving on to the bosses, I don't actually have anything negative to say about any of the bosses. I feel like they're all fair, except for one. Consort Radahn. Consort Radahn is actually just bullshit. This is the worst designed Souls boss ever. This entire fight consists of dodge, 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 dodge R1. Dodge, 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 dodge R1. It's like, that's just not fun to play. You get clipped by things that don't even hit you. And more than half of the people who actually beat the boss did it by just using a shield and rapier, some sort of one-shot technique.
It's working!
It's like when they created this boss, they had no intention of like being able to do anything else. Besides Radahn being utterly and completely bullshit, the other bosses are actually pretty good. Bale is one of the best fights in the entire game. Hands down. Best dragon fight as well, and I love Midir. Sure, he has some straight fire move that I don't know how to dodge, but his second phase is amazing. Everything about that fight is just great. But other than that, all of the bosses pretty much are really good. I do have one problem with Ramana, Saint of the Bud, is that her area in the ruins, you have no idea that she's even there. None of the enemies signify that you're going to fight some scorpion, centipede, butterfly bitch. And I feel they really dropped the ball with her, because you're kind of just going through the ruins fighting your typical shadow enemy that you've fought 1,000 times before. And then when you get to her, you're kind of like, what the hell is this? And then you beat her, and then she's just forgotten immediately. I think if they would have built her up kind of like they did Bale, or there was some scorpion, lady, butterfly enemies around there, it would have given her a cooler vibe overall, but that's just me nitpicking. And lastly, these are just some ideas that I want future FromSoft games to have that are more quality of life more than anything. Firstly, I'd like them to add a dye system to the armors, to be able to change colors so that you could actually change the fashion of your character. Because in the base game of Elden Ring, there's like 10 different armors that are all the same, just slightly different colored, and they're all lame. They should allow you to change colors of all of the outfits. Another thing I would want to see them add is More slutty armor. I know everyone's gonna be like, man, this guy's such a gooner, but I mean, come on, man. They just gotta sex it up a bit. I mean, just look at Dark Souls 3 here. Where are these tops in Elden Ring? Know what I'm saying? And lastly, they should add a storage system so that you could put items into for when you want to make new characters. This is probably like my biggest pet peeve in all FromSoft games, is you find these cool ass weapons that you're not going to use on your playthrough, and I want to use them on a new character, but I can't without getting someone to trade with. And that's just so annoying to deal with. They need to just create a stash system, much like Diablo 2 or something, where all of the items you have you could put into a stash, so when you start a new character you can start fresh with these items, rather than have to run all the way to endgame with another sword and polearm just to get to the build that you want to play with. But with that said, this video is pretty much done, so let me know if you agree with me or not. Subscribe to the channel and keep on playing Elden Ring, because I honestly love this game, and I'm playing it right now as we speak. Peace.
Thank you for playing. Should we or should we not follow the advice of the galactically stupid?